Tonight on Free Minds TV, we'll be talking about the Bible, ham sandwiches, cocaine, the Downsizer Dispatch, and a whole lot more. All coming up tonight on Free Minds TV.
And welcome to a brand new edition of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. It is episode 123, and with you as always is Toby.
And Nick.
We have a whole lot to get to, an array of different subjects that, well, they just don't really go together, but
we'll make them fit.
Tie. We'll make them fit. Talking about the Bible, cocaine, and ham sandwiches. How do those all fit together? Well, as a government intervention. And that's where we're going to start things off tonight, talking about the Bible and the government. In Texas, it looks like all public schools are going to have to fit the Bible into their curriculum some way. In 2007, legislation was passed that said in the school year of 2009-2010, the public school system would have to implement the Bible somewhere in their school system. So this is some pretty big news. Previously, the Bible hadn't really been taught in public schools. In fact, a lot of public schools forbid teaching the Bible and teaching certain religions in school, because, I mean, if you're teaching about one of them, you've kind of got to teach about all of them, and there are literally thousands of different religions. Some are real popular. We only have a base of a few really popular religions, and then they break off into all sorts of different sects, and they really get into the thousands of religions. So, Nick, what do you think? In public schools where taxpayers are paying for their kids to get an education, they don't really have a choice on all that much that's going into it. Should the Bible be taught in public schools?
I don't have a problem if the Bible is taught as part of world history, if it's discussed as a topic. The fact that religion exists, it certainly played an influential role in much of history. But I have a problem when they're teaching specifically the Bible as part of the curriculum and they're excluding other religious texts like the Quran or the Book of Mormon, because you have children in those school systems and parents of those children in those school systems who don't believe that, but they're being forced to pay money to send their kids to school to be taught about a religion, essentially taught a religion that they don't agree with.
Yeah, and that's where what it takes away is parents are usually at least given the job of teaching their kids religion, but when schools are getting into...
Well, churches can do it too. I mean, parents don't have to do it directly. A lot of people take their kids to Sunday school.
But a lot of parents choose which churches they're at least going to be influencing their kids on from the start. And if they're being taught different things in public schools, well, things get a little bit hairy. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not a huge fan of public schools, is because it takes parents out of the equation, and in a lot of cases, parents might not want their kids to learn about the Bible, or they may want them to learn about the Quran instead. And the legislation here is very vague on how they're teaching it. Is it a history lesson, or is it a creation lesson? Is it taking over for evolution and intelligent design instead? And so you're getting into some really muddy areas. If you look at the money behind this legislation, the lobbyists, it is the people who want to get intelligent design worked into schools to take over the evolution, or as a supplementary to the evolution idea that we evolved from apes and other life forms, the intelligent design, saying that the Bible and the world was created in 7 days and all that stuff. I mean, you're getting into some really muddy territory, and it's quite the slippery slope. So in my opinion, I think that we should be scaling back public schools. I think that private schools can do a much better job, and parents can say, well, I want my kid to go to a school that does teach about the Bible, or I want my kid to go to a school that teaches about the Quran, or whatever it is, the flying spaghetti monster. I mean, whatever it is, at least parents have the choice if they're sending them to a private school. But in public school, well, there is no choice.
Yeah, or even if they're not sending them to a private school. If you have a child in public school, if you want them to learn about religion, you can still do that if it's not in the public school curriculum. You just have to take the time to talk with your kids about religion or bring them to Sunday school. And presumably, a lot of the people out there who think this is a good idea, they want to make a big push to get the Bible into classrooms, they're already doing that. Their children have already been attending church as long as they've been alive. So to me, it seems like the people who really want this are already educating their kids about their particular religion. And the people who don't want it, well, there's no reason to force them to pay to have their children taught about a religion that isn't their own.
And what about me as a taxpayer? What if I'm an atheist? I have to pay taxes, though, and now I'm being forced to teach people about religion, and that might be against my beliefs. I mean, I might not even have a kid enrolled in the school, but my money is still being taken out of my wallet in the form of taxes and paying for something that I might not believe in. So it's a whole scale of different problems with this. I think the idea, as long as there are public schools, they should be kept secular. But if you guys have a different opinion, we'd love to hear from it. fmtv@freemindstv.com is the email address, but we do need to move on to this story and move on to cocaine. What's the latest, Nick?
Well, a new study has shown that 90% of U.S. money is contaminated with cocaine or shows traces of cocaine. And this was done by a group of scientists who looked at banknotes from more than 30 cities in 5 countries. And they found that U.S. and Canadian currency had the highest concentrations of cocaine, or the highest rate of bills that showed traces of cocaine, somewhere between 85 and 90%, while China and Japan showed the lowest, between 12 and 20%. Now, it's important to point out that just because money shows traces of cocaine, it doesn't mean that the money has actually come directly into contact with a whole lot of powdered cocaine. A little bit of cocaine on one bill can get transferred to other bills when they're sorted at the bank or when somebody puts them in their wallet. So it doesn't imply that 90% of U.S. bills have been used to actually ingest cocaine or purchase cocaine or anything like that. But it does sort of point out trends, and some places have much higher concentrations of cocaine in the money than others. And this is actually the highest percentage that's been found to date. A recent study that was done in the US, done 2 years ago, only found about 70% contamination. So whether it's the technology getting better or whether more people are actually using cocaine, we are finding more cocaine traces in the money supply.
Yeah, and I want to point out, as you said, it doesn't mean that all these bills are being used in cocaine deals or to ingest cocaine. I mean, a lot of bills, a high percentage, over half of them also contain fecal matter and poop on the bills as well. So this isn't meaning that everybody's doing...
That's a pleasant thought, huh?
Well, it's the fact that money is very, very dirty.
It is
and I'm
dirty.
sure it contains a whole lot of gross things that you don't really want to be ingesting. So a word of thought, but it does bring us to the subject of the war on drugs and how prevalent cocaine has become and what should be done about it. And a lot of people say, well, this is a very, very harmful drug and we need to crack down and keep it illegal. But what has that actually done? In the 1980s, when cocaine was becoming very popular, coincidentally, right after the war on drugs began and they really started to crack down on cocaine, it became very, very popular and the price skyrocketed. Well, shortly after that, there were a lot of people that wanted cocaine but couldn't afford it because it was such a high-end drug at that point. So some people went into the kitchen and invented something called crack, which could be made much more inexpensively, turning cocaine into crack. And it's also much more addictive, and the high lasts for a shorter amount of time, but you could afford it. So it got into some of the inner cities, and people started using crack instead of cocaine, which is a more harmful drug, which is all dating back to the war on drugs to begin with. And how popular would cocaine be now if the government never really got involved with it?
I'm certainly not going to make the claim that cocaine is beneficial for anyone's health or that it's anything that anyone should do. But I remember we did report on Free Minds Radio about a suppressed World Health Organization study that was done on this subject of cocaine use worldwide. And the findings of that study were suppressed because they didn't really mesh with what a lot of proponents of the drug war were saying. They were finding that cocaine use really wasn't that much of a health risk compared to, say, alcohol or tobacco use. So while a lot of people will say it's a very harmful drug, I would say that crack certainly is, but powdered cocaine, as it's used around the world, is not particularly harmful, at least according to that one study. Now, I'm not saying people should go out and do it, but there are a lot of myths out there, and the dangers are exaggerated.
And the other thing that I believe it was the same study or a similar study that came out about the same time we reported on showed that countries that have decriminalized drugs, including cocaine, have decriminalized them so that if you're using them and you're caught, you're not going to be going to jail. You get a small fine instead. The numbers of people who were using cocaine dropped by over half compared to other parts of the other countries who really cracked down on it. Countries that have decriminalized it or legalized very small amounts of it, well, the usage rate completely skyrockets down. It nosedives, and teens are much less susceptible to using it.
Yeah,
so
Portugal is one country that has decriminalized all narcotics, as far as I know, across the board, so for small possession amounts. And they're one of the countries where they saw a significant decrease in use after that was done, and that's been mirrored around the world. The Netherlands saw a similar effect when they decriminalized cannabis, and they saw marijuana usage rates go way down, especially for teenagers. Teens in the Netherlands are much less likely to be using marijuana than teens in the United States.
Right, and if you guys out there think that we're crazy suggesting getting the government out of drugs and out of the controlling drugs like cocaine, well, there are a lot of police officers, judges, and prosecutors who are also behind us. I'd recommend checking out leap.cc, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, who can make some really, really good arguments for getting the government out and ending the war on drugs and legalizing not just marijuana, but all drugs, because you can get over an addiction, but you can't get over a conviction. And studies and the numbers show that the war on drugs creates more drug users and creates more harm to society than the actual drugs
and
themselves.
It's not getting rid of the drugs. I mean, the fact of the matter is we're still, it's 2009, and we're still doing a story on how 90% of U.S. money is contaminated with cocaine.
And some urban areas I saw there, the upper bills, 50s
Washington,
and 100s,
D.C. has a very high contamination rate.
100% in some of the urban areas contained it. So the richer parts of town. Anyways, we do need to move on. Speaking of drugs, what Law Enforcement Against Prohibition says is it's not a criminal problem, it's a health problem. And you shouldn't be dealing with it. Criminal justice shouldn't be dealing with drugs. It should be health organizations and doctors dealing with people who are addicted to certain substances. So let's use that as kind of an intro to the next subject, which is healthcare. Not the United States quite yet, but Canada. Nix, what's the latest? How are they doing up in Canada?
Well, certain people in Canada would tell you that their healthcare system isn't doing very well. In fact, the incoming president of the Canadian Medical Association says Canada's healthcare system is in dire straits. It's verging on collapse. And her name, is Dr. Anne Doig. And she says, we all agree that the system is imploding. We all agree that things are more precarious than perhaps most Canadians realize. Now, this should be significant to most American viewers because, of course, Canada has a single-payer healthcare system. The government pays all the healthcare costs. Private insurance is not available in Canada. It's not legal. There's a black market, I'm sure, in private healthcare, but there are no legal ways to achieve healthcare that's not provided by the government. And I think it's important to point out that even people in the Canadian medical establishment are admitting now that their system is broken, and a lot of what they're saying seems to sound a lot like what critics of the American healthcare system are saying about our own system. So, just because the system we have right now is flawed doesn't mean that Canada's system is the answer. That's what you'll hear from a lot of people advocating.
But Nick, they're not talking about the healthcare bill that's going through and being discussed isn't a single payer. Doesn't that make all the difference?
Well, the healthcare bill that's being discussed in the United States is not single payer in what it does right now. But what it is going to do is to provide a public option that is subsidized by the taxpayers. The government is going to be able to provide insurance to people at artificially low premiums, and that's probably going to drive most insurers out of business, or at least it's going to drive most citizens to get their health insurance from the government because it's going to be cheaper, because it's going to be subsidized. And once you get rid of the private insurers, then you essentially have a single-payer plan.
Yeah. And those private insurers right now are lobbying for this bill because, well, if they lobby for it and they get on top, well, maybe they can have the monopoly of a single-payer system if we go down that road. And
I just wanted to point out that the incoming president of the Canadian Medical Association here, she's not advocating going completely to free market healthcare. Actually, what she is proposing is essentially Obamacare. She wants to go to a public option plan or allowing people to opt out of the system. So essentially, Canada is trying to take a step away from socialized medicine at the same time the U.S. is taking a step towards it. So even if the U.S. waters down this healthcare reform and we get just more government intervention, the government doesn't completely take over the system, we may still end up having the same healthcare style system as Canada does.
All right, well, let's move on a little bit. We are running low on time, and we've got to get to the Downsizer Dispatch to let people know what they can actually do about this, because, I mean, these town hall meetings that have been going on, we've reported on them. The officials aren't listening to us, but there's one thing that they do actually have to count. It's not heads, because they don't really care about that. Angry protesters, they don't care about that. They do actually have to count your emails, though, that you send to those fools in Washington. Each one you send them does count. So let's get into how people can make a difference to contact their representatives with the Downsizer Dispatch.
Well, this week's Downsize DC is actually focusing on healthcare reform. And they're pointing out here that people in favor of government intervention or government-led healthcare are going to delay the full implementation of the bill. So essentially what this is going to do is it's not going to implement all of the things that are in the bill until about 5 years in, which means that they can disguise the cost because they're not going to be implementing it upfront in full. So the first year or two, they might only be spending $100 billion on the program. And that's sort of what they've been throwing around, is that it's going to cost about $1 trillion over 10 years. But the fact of the matter is we're not really going to be able to know what the full costs of the program are until we're about 50% of the way into that 10-year window. So it's very easy for them to disguise what the true cost is going to be, and it could easily end up being quite a bit more. Government programs almost always end up running over budget, not under budget, and this is not going to be any exception. So you can go to downsizedc.org and contact your elected officials in Washington, let them know what you think about this.
Actually, they do have, each representative in Washington has at least 6 different people lobbying for this health care or against this health care bill. So it's good to contact them and let them know what you think as well, because, well, a lot of people are talking to them, so get your opinion heard as well. All right, we've got to move on. When we come back, though, we are going to be getting into ham sandwiches and cell phones. A new restriction, the newest in the whole country, something that has never been done before about cell phones and talking on them. We'll bring you the latest news when we come back. Stay tuned. This is Free Minds TV. Free Minds TV is brought to you in part by Life Productions for your basic and semi-pro video production needs. From full wedding and event coverage to DVD authoring and distributions, lifeproductions.com. That's lyfproductions.com.
I'm Sam with OTN, and you're watching Free Minds TV, one of the few media sources that asks you to think for yourself.
And welcome back to Free Minds TV. As always, it's Toby here with you.
And Nick.
All right, I'd like to invite the viewers to log on to our website, freemindstv.com. From there, there's ways to help this show, the archives, the radio side, the blogs, and a whole lot more, as well as the member side, only $3 a month or $30 a year. It contains tons of bonus features, all up at freemindstv.com. All right, let's move right along here and get into some more of the issues. We will be getting into ham sandwiches. It's very, very important news we'll bring you. But first, I wanted to go to something brand new, some brand new legislation that our elected officials are ramming down people's throats, or at least in Philadelphia they are. It's brand new. It's never been tried anywhere in the world, Nick. Banning cellular phones, or at least talking or texting on cellular phones, while skateboarding, bicycling, or while on roller skates. This legislation is due to be set into place on November 1st. So as of November 1st, if you are talking on a cell phone or texting on a cell phone.
What if I'm stopped?
That's okay, as long as you're not
in motion.
Nope,
the wheels can't be in motion.
Right, you need to stop those wheels in motion whenever you're on your cell phone, or texting on your cell phone. The first offense will cost you $150, and repeat offenders will get some more fines after that. So I don't think it'll be long before this legislation spreads across the nation, because usually governments work like this. As soon as one government passes something, and the next government over, the next town over, maybe the next state over, will pass it as well. So it's very important to keep an eye on this, because while you might not be in Philly and you might still be allowed to ride a bicycle and talk on the phone, eventually you won't if we continue down this path. This is how talking on the cell phones in cars got banned in most places. This is how smoking bans started. It starts in one place, and then it slowly trickles down. There are people who are saying that this is the greatest thing. Resident Michael Connors strongly supports the cell phone ban and says, quote, "This town has not stepped up to do anything bold in years, decades, and it's about time we did." Well, bold in the wrong direction, if you ask me, because you're right, it's been a while since they did anything bold, such as getting the government off their backs and scaling back government. It's been quite a while since they did that. They've been continuing to amp it up and pass more laws all along. So bad news, and continue to watch it, because I predict that this will be spreading to other parts of the country and other parts of the world very soon.
Can you use your hands-free device?
Yes, you can use your hands-free device, which studies have shown are just as dangerous as
the distraction factor is that you're talking.
That means you should be banned from talking to people.
Although texting, I always thought was a really bad idea to try
it while
you're
driving. You're going to hurt yourself.
Or driving.
Like consequence learned. All right, let's move along, though, because we have a bunch more articles to get to and not much time. Let's talk about that ham sandwich, Nick. What's the latest about it?
Ham sandwich.
Can I have a ham sandwich?
You can, but it might give you bowel cancer.
Oh.
And that's
What
what
won't give me cancer?
I don't know at this point, but let me get into the article here. The World Cancer Research Fund says there is convincing evidence that eating processed meats increases the risk of bowel cancer. While there is no specific research on eating the meats in childhood, the charity said the evidence in adults was too strong to ignore. Marnie Craze, Children's Education Manager for WCRF, said if children have processed meat in their lunch every day over the course of a school year, then they will be eating quite a lot. So they say it's better if children view processed meat as an occasional treat if it's eaten at all. So you know the deli cut ham?
That's my favorite food in the world are deli meats. Seriously.
And this is what they're
Favorite
coming
food.
after next.
I love deli meats. Ham, turkey, roast beef. Deli meats are the best. Can I just get a new bowel?
I don't know. You know, they say the evidence is
Everything seems to be killing me, Nick.
Well, here's the thing, though.
Anything that's good and fun.
They say there's strong evidence. You know, the way they word this article, they say there's strong evidence that processed meat causes bowel cancer. Okay, but they don't say how much it increases your risk of bowel cancer. Just because it's strong evidence doesn't mean there's a strong increase that correlates with eating a whole lot of processed meat. So maybe it only causes cancer in 1 in 100,000 people, for all I know.
Yeah, you know.
How big of a risk is it?
I want to wait
'Cause
until more
everything will
studies
kill
come
you.
out, because a lot of these correlation studies are flawed in the way that they're collecting their data. For example, a lot of studies have come out against coffee, saying it's very bad, but a lot of the people they studied when they're studying about how bad coffee is for you were also smokers. So they're correlating health effects with
Now coffee
smoking.
is good for you, from the
Now
studies I've
studies are
heard.
coming out that saying coffee is good for you. It prevents liver cancer, Parkinson's disease, and a list of other diseases as well. There's a lot of studies that are coming out and saying coffee is good when it used to say it's bad. And you know what? This is how it usually works in life. Moderation is the key. Don't let them go after your deli meats now. Don't let them do it. We know that that's how they got rid of smoking. Don't let them go after your deli meats. All right.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean,
Don't let them do it now.
There have been pushes for taxes on sugary sweets. Some states have been doing that.
Don't
Sugary
tax my deli meats. They're already expensive
Sugary
enough.
sodas get hit with a much higher tax in New York State. So
way back.
we are at the point where they're coming after unhealthy food now.
Especially if the government's involved with healthcare, it's in everybody's best interest. It's your tax dollars, Nick. We don't want everyone having bowel cancer. Better
then
up
what
the
you
price.
eat is, you know, it's a matter of public policy what you're consuming.
Now my neighbor is concerned with what I'm putting in my body because, well, it's attached to his wallet because he's paying my health insurance. All right, moving right along. We got a couple more stories I want to get to. I want to talk about lemonade, Nick, because, you know, there's a scourge going on around the United States right now, and it has to do with little children running lemonade stands. Yes, these girls, they sometimes, and sometimes boys, they set up these lemonade stands running afoul of the law. Yes, they don't always go out and file the correct paperwork, and they usually don't go out and buy themselves a business license, which can be thousands and thousands of dollars and take years and years to get. But that will not stop the city officials from shutting them down. This latest story, and we've talked about a whole myriad of these over the summer with Free Minds TV, is coming out of Tulare, California, where a young girl named Danielle Ernest was busted by Richard Garcia, the health inspector, because she was running a lemonade stand and she had not filled out the proper paperwork and she had not paid for her business license. But don't worry, Nick, the city officials are being compassionate. While they did kick her off her block, she was trying to raise money to go to Disney World, a family trip to Disney World. She was trying to raise the money. They did kick her off the block and she wasn't allowed to do that. They are thinking about allowing people who want to have lemonade stands to pay a nominal fee instead of having to fill out a whole license paperwork for a business and get away with selling lemonade. They just have to pay the government some of their money. Poor little 8-year-old girl. Anyways, good news did come from this. People felt very bad for her, and a radio station actually bought her and her parents and her entire family passes to Disneyland. So it did work out in her favor, but it does just go to show, man, what is the government doing when you have a man hired to go around busting 8-year-old girls for selling lemonade? And this is not an isolated incident. We've reported on a few different cases like this, and there's new ones coming out every day with officials busting and police officers busting little people, well, not little people, but, you know, kids for selling lemonade without a license.
And one has to wonder if they're willing to knock it down so you pay a nominal fee and don't fill out any of the paperwork, what does that say about how they value their government paperwork? I mean, if they're going to take the position that they need to enforce the permitting process and that is there to keep people safe, then why are they saying, oh, well, we can waive that because it's just kids running a lemonade stand? but you still have to give the city money in order to do that.
Yeah, you know, Nick, I never really trusted the kids' lemonade. It was boogers and stuff, and every time I've bought it, I've just paid them and dumped it out when I'm around the corner. But, you know, it's probably not going to kill you. It'll only make you stronger. The kids seem to be healthy usually, so I think it's a place where the government doesn't need to get involved. In the land of the free, home of the brave, you can't sell lemonade without a business license. All right, moving right along, this story is cutting to the root of America's justice system, or injustice system. This is where it all comes down to. And if you're wondering why all these bills are going before the Supreme Court and being passed off as constitutional when they're clearly unconstitutional, well, it's because of the people who are on the Supreme Court is one of the main reasons. This is a story that just runs chills up my spine because it goes along with, gives the attitude of the kind of people who are sitting on the bench in the Supreme Court. Is it Scalia? Is that the name? Justice Scalia has come out in dissent against a ruling that allowed a man by the name of Tony Anthony Davis to have a retrial of a murder case that he was involved in. Troy Anthony Davis was convicted of murder and sentenced to die. Since then, 7 of the witnesses against him have recanted their testimony, and some have even implicated Red Coles, a witness who testified against Mr. Troy. So pretty much there were a lot of witnesses, over 7 of them, who recanted their testimony that they were testifying against him, and said they were pressured into testifying against murdering this, I guess it was a police officer back in 1989. Well, after all this has come out and the evidence is really pointing to they've got the wrong guy, Amnesty International stepped in and got his case to go before the Supreme Court. Now, this doesn't happen very often, but they did get his case to go before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in a 6-2 decision that he should have another evidentiary retrial to see if he can get another and complete trial before he's put on death row and killed. Well, this is the scary part in my opinion. Scalia said this in his dissent: "This court has never held that the Constitution forbids the execution of a convicted defendant who has had a full and fair trial, but is later able to convince a habeas court that he is actually innocent. Quite to the contrary, we have repeatedly left that question unresolved while expressing considerable doubt that any claim based on an alleged actual innocent is constitutionally cognizable." Well, you know what that actually says? That says the Constitution says we can execute innocent people so long as they had a trial and were convicted.
Even if there's evidence,
that says they are innocent people. The Constitution of the United States says executing innocent people is okay. Imagine what he's voting on other bills, how he's ruling on other bills, whether they're constitutional or not. It's disgusting to think about. I mean, these are the fools that are on the bench. If you have evidence that a man is innocent, he says kill him anyways, because a court of law in America found him guilty once. Throw out the evidence, the new evidence that's come out. A court once found him guilty, so off with his head. Sick.
That's Scalia for you. I mean,
that's the Supreme Court of the United States.
Court.
Those are the men in robes or dresses who are ruling whether things are constitutional or unconstitutional. And that's why we're in the mess we're in today, because we have fools in Washington, fools elected as president, and then the people who are supposed to check and balance them, well, they think it's okay to kill innocent people so long as they're found guilty in a court of law. Anyways, that's going to do us for tonight. We're out of time. But you can join us at freemindstv.com for all the bonus material, show content, the radio side, the blogs, and a whole lot more. Until then, it's been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Have a great night.